call Moanamaki.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. And I want to start by saying to the Minister, the member in the chair, that it's a bit galling to be told that we shouldn't be allowed to debate things in Parliament. That might be the way the National Act government runs things, but it's not the way that the opposition sees Parliament running. It's not our fault. Well, I bet they do have debates in their caucus, particularly around the fact that Paul Hutchison and the National Party promised at the last election that they would not vote for this legislation, and tonight they are. I'm sure there were debates around that. But I say to the member in the chair, it's not our fault that the National Party members and the ACT members are sitting there like dried arrangements not taking a call. We would love them to stand up and actually debate this bill, instead of sitting there muttering under their breath. I want to recognise the efforts of the Honourable David Carter, who has had 2 successful closure motions out of 2 tonight. A very good evening, Minister. Very good evening. Perhaps a press release to acknowledge that all your work and success this evening might be in order. Mr Chair, I want to concentrate on 2 things in this purpose clause. One is the inaccuracy of the purpose clause as it sits, and the second is the fallacy of this purpose clause. Because this purpose clause isn't about upholding students' rights at all. This purpose clause is about the fact that opponents to student associations cannot even get 10% support of students to force a referendum on campus, so they have come to Parliament to pass legislation that a party that sits on 1% in the polls wants passed. 1% of the population of New Zealand are forcing this legislation on 100% of students. If students want voluntary student membership, you only have to get 10% of students and if that is impossible, as it clearly is, apart from in the universities where they have had the referenda. We've talked about Waikato, which went voluntary and then went back because it was such a disaster. Well, the ACT Party, sitting on 1% support, has said that they don't think that the students at Waikato know what they want. They don't think that the students of Waikato are able to hold a democratic referendum and to decide for themselves. The 1% party is going to tell them what is best for their organisation, their university and their student association.
What kind of state outfit is this?
I mean, this is astonishing from the party that claims to be about freedom and personal rights. Well, here we have a piece of legislation that is only in this House because through democratic processes they have been unable to kill off student associations and student membership of those associations. And I think that's an embarrassment for this House, and the member in charge of the bill should be ashamed of it, and the members of National and ACT who are voting for this legislation should be ashamed of it, because this is not what students want. Now, if there are issues with the referendum, if ACT Party members on campus are finding it too hard to find 10% of students to force a referendum, well, change it to 5%. We could have done that. If, as the member says, the ability to opt out is too difficult, why is she not addressing that? Why is she not addressing that? And I know that student associations came to the Select Committee and said that they were happy to look at making the opting out processes easier if that was the big burning issue that was requiring this sledgehammer legislation to be forced through Parliament. And I find it astonishing that kind of the party of small government, you know, the party of not having the state get involved in everything, has now come to Parliament in order to get the government and the New Zealand Parliament to pass a piece of legislation because they haven't been able to argue their case on the campuses of New Zealand. I think that's embarrassing for the member in charge of the bill, and I want to hear from a National Party member about why they have changed their position on this legislation, why they have broken their promise made at the last election that they would not support this legislation, Any National Party member will do. Sandra Gowdy, she was very loud before, she's now ignoring me. That's fine. They're all heads down, working very, very hard because they don't want to have to answer. Well, Mr. Colin King, maybe he can answer the question as to why National have broken their promise on this issue. Because the fact is, Mr. Chair, the purpose clause says that the purpose of this Act is to uphold students' rights to freedom of association, by removing any requirement for students to join student... Mr Chair,
Chairman.
Chair.
I call Sue Moroney.